I don't have anything terribly significant to add, except that from where we sit, we value many different layers of oversight and represent a decision-making body that is representative of our community and of the types of services that are being selected. And so we certainly encourage and we value those types of levels of oversight and accountability within government. So thank you.
It's often the case with large contracts, and particularly CDBG funds where you would be building something perhaps, that the pure little nonprofit is not the only player here, but that there are significant architects, contractors, and other people of means and clout that are part of this process in lobbying for and assisting a nonprofit to do that, right? How does this fit in with your overall approach? How is the system trying to create a little more level playing field for those who may not have the big guys behind them, but have a worthy project?
To address the question about the CDBG and the larger projects, those types of new construction projects are required to follow the state procurement code, and you have to have a competitive bid for engineers and architects if they are to be paid for with those types of grant monies. So it must be a competitive process in order to select those professionals. I believe the only exemption to that I've ever seen is you get to pick your own lawyer without having to do procurement.
I think there isn't much lobbying done now because this committee selects they go through all of the RFPs and come out with those who qualify, and the same with the commission. They go through this whole process. There is a concern among the council members that because the new GIA monies are allocated to each district, and yet each council member has no say in what the priorities are for those monies. So we're looking at ways we can get a little more involved, and I hope we can find a common ground.
I think that's the ongoing dilemma is you have large nonprofits that are very savvy, very professional in the way that they operate and deliver service, and they have the economies of scale to be able to provide the kind of service and weather the times when payments are disrupted or there's a shortfall in government appropriation, or et cetera. Whatever kind of rainy day situations that happen, the larger nonprofits can certainly withstand that. And they have the reserves, basically, to be able to withstand that. You then sometimes, though, have smaller nonprofits that offer niche services, and they are so small that they tend to be more agile, really, and more adaptable and facile, and they offer more grassroots, customized services that government might need, but they don't have the organizational capacity to really deliver on demand. And they're the one-person shop kind of doing everything, but yet they may have grassroots volunteer, a base that can really deliver a service, actually. And what I would recommend within the, I know it's hard within the confines of GIA parameters or contracting parameters, but if there could be collaborations that marry the large infrastructure and stability of the large organization with the innovativeness and the creativity and the grassroots contact of the smaller organizations, and provide collaborated services together, maybe under the umbrella of the larger one. It might be, you might get, you know, both, you know, a bigger bang for the buck, basically, and greater value in service. So we, from where we sit, again, we encourage that kind of collaboration and creativity, where it's sort of a win-win-win situation between the small, large nonprofit as well as the government partner.
We've all seen commercials on TV for folks raising funds for worthy causes, hunger in Africa or whatever, right? But there's also another narrative going on about well, what percentage of the money you donate actually goes to the project? Another way of saying this is, what is the administrative overhead versus the actual programmatic services, right? Is this an important consideration that's formally in the review process, or is that just one of the sort of things that you might come across? Is it in the applications where you look at the overhead?
And I'm cheating looking at your notes, and I'm going to explain. Community Development Block Grants is what CDBG is. Somebody asked. The Community Development Block Grants are federal money that mandates no more than 10% can be used for administrative costs. So 90% must go to the direct services. And we have informally adopted the same philosophy on the Grants-in-Aids. It's just an internal procedure, and that's what we've been applying across the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great standard, and we should stick to it.
%10 overhead. So I get the general traditional value that programs, expenses should be high, and management and overhead should be low. Having said that, I really challenge that. I don't think that you can get all of that done and meet the expectations of your partner without overhead. Overhead is something that provides the infrastructure, the very valuable and needed infrastructure for management and program to do the job that it needs to do. And you know, in our sector, we've talked about kind of the new way of thinking is the myth of overhead, that funders in general tend to want to see that at 10%, and that actually is what that says is that it's a very unstable operation, working at 10% to provide a huge bloated programmatic support system or programmatic operation, and it kills nonprofits to have to work within 10% overhead in order to deliver on the service. So I challenge the notion, and I would encourage, when you look at institutions like Harvard, they are charging 35 to 55, 60% overhead, and they get away with it because they basically deliver quality service or quality education. When you think about generally the culture of educational institutions, it's that high. So for health and human service or other safety net services to be as low as 10% is challenging for us. So,
Yeah, I kind of look at it as the 10% salaries, because there are some nonprofits that their executive directors or presidents get a really huge salary, and less money is then going to services and research, et cetera. So I just look at it as the 10% should, as relating to salaries. I don't know.
Yeah, the federal regs are a little bit tighter than that, but we can certainly have that conversation, Lisa. Thank you for making that point.
And just a comment, when you get a federal grant at a university, the overhead is like 30% or more, and that is because of the acknowledgement that capacity is related to program. And I guess one of the concerns that was behind that earlier question had to do with, if you're a mature organization and you've already dealt with capacity and you have a program, right, then maybe 10% is just fine for that little carve out. But if this is your whole gig, you know, right, and you don't have capacity, and many funders do not fund capacity, that does perhaps speak to what Lisa was talking about. Big guy, small guy, you know, and having the same standard across the board could be an effectiveness issue. But that was that, okay. This was perhaps dealt with a little bit, but, and it is part of our sort of theme of the diversity among nonprofits, but are there any funds explicitly set aside for newer nonprofits or new projects that people have not thought of? Perhaps you might call it the innovative sector of nonprofits. Is that part of the mix, or is it mainly sort of keeping things going while the economy recovers?
The federal community development block grants do provide for economic development as one of the needs that can be addressed. Off the top of my head, I'm not able to give you one. Lemongrass Cafe in Chinatown is one example of a project that was funded with CDBG, and I think it was economic development. But it is one of the goals of the HUD Community Development Block Grant Program.
Well, and that's why I keep pushing for more acknowledgement, more recognition of the small nonprofits. And that's why the council put in $8 million because we reach out into each of our districts and we know what needs there are and what new groups may have been organized that have gone through the 501c3 process that are eligible, but they're just too little, too new to receive any kind of monies.
I'm going to come at it from a different perspective of how we define innovation. And sometimes innovation, the go-to, the default is to look at the new spangled thing that's come on the scene and fund that because it's the newest thing. And I would argue that innovation in the nonprofit sector has been happening in myriads of ways from the beginning of time, whether it's an innovative collaboration, an innovative process of delivery. So I think what we tend to see happen is government partners with nonprofit in a reactionary mode to respond to the safety net services or other types of things that support disadvantaged populations, however you define disadvantaged. And sometimes the funding, like venture capital style funding, might come from outside of government, like through private trusts and foundations. When we think about innovation in that traditional sense. But actually, when you think about government, private, public partnerships, there are lots of really innovative partnerships going on as we speak. The Hawaii Health Connector is kind of the new thing happening with federal monies here in Hawaii, the healthcare exchange program. That's being funded by federal money through kind of, no matter what you feel about the Affordable Health Care Act, that's kind of the mechanism that it's coming down through. In land conservation, there's a lot of innovation going on. There's a partnership between city, federal, and state money to protect, to do land conservation on the North Shore through the Nonprofit Trust for Public Land. And then there's, in the arts and culture arena, the State Foundation of Culture and the Arts provides funding for promoting the arts. And then in the educational sector, the program RISE, Rewarding Internships for Sustainable Employment, is working with the nonprofit Kupu and the State Department of Business, Economic and Development and Tourism, community colleges, and the Federal Environment Protection Agency to develop a green workforce. So these kinds of new ideas and innovative approaches are actually happening as we speak and through this three-legged stool partnership of business, government, and nonprofits.
Obviously, aging has been one of our ongoing concerns. I guess the first question is, part of this is an aging-friendly city one of the priorities? If not, why not? But if it is, what is being done through these sort of grants to make us a more aging-friendly city?
The mayor has just included Honolulu in the AARP Aging Friendly City Initiative. In fact, myself, the director of the Department of Planning and Permitting, and the director of the Department of Transportation, Mike Formby, the three of us are, and Councilmember Kobayashi also, are on a steering committee. And we're just now pulling together the resources and going to embark on a plan, develop a plan to ensure that Honolulu is an age-friendly city. And from there, after we develop our plan, we're looking forward to some initiatives that we can fund to support that process.